Sorry to my fellow Conservatives, but Canada's world-famous truck blockade is not a fight for freedom against the idiotically woke Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who's now channeling his inner Fidel Castro. No, it's a fight between one set of bullies and another. Just take a look at this picture from blockaded Ottawa. Protesters flying the flag of freedom, all right, that's great, but they're doing it while taking away the freedom of everyone else to use that road. And that is just one example of 1,000. I'll show some more in a second. But to me, the big picture is this. I wouldn't trust my freedom with either side. In fact, this whole confrontation is Canada's shame, with freedom up in smoke. Now, I get it. I sure get the excitement that this 3-week blockade of Ottawa and even the cutting of the border crossings to the United States has had for many of the right, including Donald Trump. I mean, it's got them celebrating. And finally, proof that the right can do revolutions too. They can do them just as well as the left. They can stick it to the big guy. They can fight tyranny as well. It's also romantic. And will you look at the size of those big trucks? It's so manly. But already as a Conservative, I'm thinking, uh-oh, revolution? Using force to get your way? Wait a minute. But let me first make something clear. These protesters could have had me right on board because they actually had some right on their side. They had a real issue here. These truckers were furious at being forced to get vaccinated if they wanted to keep their jobs. They had to get vaccinated across the US border into Canada, and some truckers don't trust vaccines. Yet here they had a government saying, stick that drug into your body or we will take away your job. And that sounded dictatorial to me. And when some of these truckers had a truck they now couldn't even use because of all this, that's a huge, huge deal financially too, to people who are quite often struggling. You'd have to be an idiot like Trudeau not to have had some sympathy with them. Of course, personally, I do trust the vaccines. I don't get some of these vaccine conspiracy theories. And I even support vaccine mandates in, say, aged care homes, where lives could be saved. But forcing truckers to take them too, well, exactly what good does that do? Marginal, I'd say. I mean, sure, vaccines would help save their own lives, but that's their call. For us, the rest of the people, how much is that the business of anyone, whether they're vaccinated or not? As long as most other people get vaccinated, and in fact, most are. In fact, even among truckies in Canada, 85% or more are now vaccinated. We're talking about a small minority here. But it's also true that the vaccinated can still spread the virus. So how much does it hurt anyone else, whether that tiny minority of Canada's truckers are not vaccinated? And that's why Ontario's Premier actually said this week that he will lift that province's proof of vaccination requirements. So there was something here that Trudeau could have actually talked about with his protesters, an issue he could have talked about seriously and sympathetically if he was a real leader and not a clown. If he wasn't one of these modern woke politicians who have been quicker to exploit differences in this pandemic than to negotiate around them. I cannot believe what this man did instead. It was like he got his finger and wanted to poke it right in the protester's eye. He even banned sending the truckers food. You're breaking the law if you give them a hamburger. And treating the truckers like enemies of the state with the most extravagant abuse. That they're all anti-Semites apparently, Islamophobic. They're anti-black racists, homophobic too, and transphobic. Is there nothing he couldn't throw at them? It was the whole woke smear.
We won't give in to those who fly racist flags.
What a hypocrite this man was. He was condemning the truckers for the very things that they were condemning in him.
There is no place in our country for threats, violence, or hatred.
Does Trudeau even listen to himself? There is no place for hatred in this country. You Jew-hating racist bigots. There is no place for threats in this country. And if you don't get the jab, I'll get your job. I mean, that's not pouring oil on wounds. It's rubbing salt. And I'm totally with this trucker today describing the Trudeau style.
Love confrontation. I don't like this environment. Every time he does something, it just kind of it's actually just motivated more people to show up.
And no wonder, because who loves a bully like Trudeau? And yet, the protesters stuffed it up by being hypocrites just as bad as Trudeau. Freedom, they cried, while taking away the freedom of other Canadians. They blocked crossings to the United States, taking away the freedom of movement from others and causing shortages of supplies, threatening jobs. They blocked Ottawa's streets, taking the freedom of others to go about their daily business. They sounded their horns all through the night, taking away the freedom of others to have a good night's sleep until a judge stepped in to stop it. A few even took away the freedom of a soup kitchen run by the Shepherds of Good Hope to help the homeless without being abused and harassed or face for hours of demands by truckers that they be fed too. Kind of bullying that forced the charity to appeal for mercy. And to my friends on the right side of politics, I've got to ask you, when Antifa acts like that, when Black Lives Matter acts like that, and boy have they, what do you say then? You say, and rightly, how dare a tiny minority bully everyone else? You say, quite rightly, how dare protesters take over the streets when they could make their protest peacefully in the park without actually being such a nuisance? And you say, again quite rightly, protesters should make their point with reason, not force. You are absolutely right about those protesters of the left. And you'd be just as right saying the same of these truckers. But here we are these days, right? So much division. Politicians skilled, as we've seen particularly in this pandemic, in dividing people in order to conquer. Where does that leave us Conservatives? I tell you what, we're now betrayed by both sides.